From Boxland Media Studios in beautiful Worthington, Ohio, this is Amplify Worthington with your hosts, Matt Lofi and David McCorkle.
Hello and welcome to Amplify Worthington, a podcast focused on all things business and economic development here in Greater Worthington. I'm one of your co-hosts, Matt Lofi, Executive Director of the Worthington Area Chamber, and next to me, as always, is Mr. David McCorkle, our Assistant City Manager and the Economic Development Director of the City of Worthington. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. We have another podcast episode.
We have another podcast. This should be a fun one.
For me, it is.
Yeah. I'm on the hot seat a little bit.
I'm asking all the questions that were submitted, and you're gonna give all the answers.
I think maybe next time when we ask for questions, they're geared towards the chamber and not just the city.
And that's where we're gonna stop doing the questions.
Yeah. I don't know about all that.
No, I'm just joking. But we were talking before we started this episode. We were talking about family trips, and you have a special one coming up.
We do. So I'm taking the three boys. My wife and I are taking the three boys to the Bahamas this summer. So there's a little bit of backstory behind it. So my oldest is 10 years old, and we kind of backed into how many summers we have left with him before he spreads his wings and flies. And it got us thinking that we should plan to do one really cool trip each year, and each member of the family gets to pick. And so we actually did a fantasy football style draft.
No, you didn't.
Yes, we did.
Oh, that's awesome.
Where we put everybody's name in a hat and drew, and whoever got the first pick told us where we were going to go this summer. And Mom and Dad do get to veto if it's a little too outrageous. But my oldest, Cooper, identified Atlantis in the Bahamas.
I like that.
So that's where we're headed this summer.
That's cool.
So we're pretty excited about that. Bank account is not excited about that, but that's it is what it is. You can't put a price on love.
Was there an outrageous one in the hat?
There's some outrageous ones.
Did you have to veto one?
We haven't vetoed them yet.
Okay.
But we'll see where we're at financially when we cross that bridge.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, we have a special trip coming up here. This first part of the year, this first quarter, and then some is just all big events for the chamber. And so I had recently told my wife, I go, we need to put something that's kind of like that prize at the end of the tunnel, family trip. And our son, who his name Tuckerman is named after Tuckerman Ravine on Mount Washington in New Hampshire, the White Mountains, has been saying almost daily for the last 2 months he wants to go back to his mountain. And so we're going back to the White Mountains. We're going to North Conway. But my wife, who I did not know was regularly going during the workday for kind of like a mental break, was going on Airbnb to look at places, found a tiny home. So we're staying in a tiny home that has 2 lofts, and then it's in walking distance of like this downtown you would see that like in X Games or Hallmark Christmas movies. That's North Conway. Now we're in walking distance, of course, to an outlet mall, which again, coming back to the bank account, no sales tax there.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
But then also one of the best coffee shops she said she's ever been to. But we're going to be in a tiny house. So our 3-year-old just is in love with what he's referring to as his tiny house.
Nice. Have you done that before?
Not the tiny house, no. So I'm excited. There's two lofts, but there's one with a single bed and then like a queen size. So I think we're going to stay up there. I don't know if we can trust a 3-year-old up on his own, but if he was a little older, I'd kind of say, go off on your own, because that'd be cool.
That certainly
I might go on my own loft.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Your wife and Tuckerman, and then you separately in the loft.
Yeah,
that'll work.
Or if I hike too long and smell, maybe I just get
she'll
relegated.
put you there.
Yeah,
she'll put you there.
I'll just say the shower didn't work or something. But I could talk all day about trips. But we actually, before we started this podcast, we asked for our business leaders and community members to give us questions. We had 2 or 3 dozen questions submitted. So we tried to lump them all up into asking you about 8 questions today that were submitted. These are not questions from us. These were submitted. So I do want to do the disclaimer just so everyone is aware that these were submitted early January. We are recording mid-January, so by the time we answer some of these, council may have moved some forward in terms of relevancy of some of these questions, but also other things may have developed. So we just want to put that precursor out there. But for the first of probably 3 or 4 times, submit your questions to us, even after this episode, at AmplifyWorthington@gmail.com, because we want to make sure that when we bulk record like we are, that this is a segment that stays where we're getting that information out there and we're putting David on the hot seat.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important, episodes that we're going to do. We're answering questions that we have, and I was a little surprised by the amount of interest that we had starting off
without even having an episode
and
out.
Some of them are more hard-hitting questions that I will do my best to answer, but I'm excited.
So I'll just kind of go in the list of how these came. And again, if you're someone that submitted these questions, we had 3 dozen questions submitted, so we kind of lumped all of these together. The first question that I want to ask you on this episode is regarding electric vehicles. We all see the research out there. We see an increase of electric vehicles out on the road, commercials out there of different car brand names that are bringing these out. What is the city doing to prepare itself for the increased demand of electric vehicles and the adoption rates that we might have here in the city regarding EVs?
Yep, great question. I'll take this as kind of two components, right? So the first is city themselves. So like our fleet management, what are we doing as a organization to kind of prepare ourselves? And the second one is kind of the consumer product, adoption rates of EVs. In 2020, we received a grant from AEP to install 2 DC fast chargers in Worthington. One is located at the community center. The other is located in Old Worthington, back behind the former Worthington Inn space. What I'll say, generally speaking, is the adoption rate and the usage rate of those chargers has steadily increased over the last 2.5 years. During the pandemic, we saw our lowest point. Most recently, with December of 2022, we're seeing our peak. So we do have about 300 total individual uses of those stations per month. That is up significantly. And month over month, that continues to increase. What I will also state with that, what is a little unique is we have what we call, we have about 80 unique users. So even though those stations are being used between the two 300 times a month, we've got about 80 unique users. So we have frequent hitters. We have a lot of these chargers. One is located again at the community center, and one is within a neighborhood in Old Worthington. I think we have a lot of users that are local, that tend to use it multiple times. That is fantastic. We want to build on that, and we want to make these more used and used at a higher rate by people visiting or passing through Worthington. Getting back to the heart of the question, what we're doing to position ourselves. So we are looking at our fleet. So our service and engineering director, John Moorhead, is looking at ways that we can increase our adoption rate as an organization. We already have several vehicles that are hybrid, but we are looking at converting some of our fleet to fully electric. It is a process, but we are moving down that path. As far as adoption rates and positioning ourselves for the future, on the residential side or the consumer side, what I'll say is our infrastructure as a city could probably use some upgrades at some point. We are okay right now. So we, an average EV uses 30, has about a 30 amp pull, during the night. On average, our houses have about a 250 amp capacity. And so we're okay right now. So there's not a huge pull from the system. But as adoption rates continue to increase, we will need to work to make sure that we have updated infrastructure in place. We will work with AEP, in the coming months and coming years to make sure we do that. Right now, we're okay. But as adoption rates continue to increase, we'll need to make some upgrades. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And I don't have an EV, but I know just where our chamber office is at the AAA parking lot, there's also a station right there for charging. On the topic, though, of area businesses, we had a lot of questions come in about small businesses, predominantly around restaurants here in the community. So I kind of have a two-part question for you. What does the city do to support small businesses and restaurants? And then the kind of second tier that I can come back to with this is, with all of the development happening, what are you doing to try and balance between local small businesses and franchises coming into the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we received, you and I know that we received 4 or 5 questions about just this topic. So we bucketed these together, and I'll do my best to answer all components of that question. But what I'll share is we have a highly customized approach to assisting small businesses and specifically restaurants in Worthington. We meet with the restaurants or prospective restaurants. Sometimes that requires me cold calling. So it's me reaching out to businesses that I know are expanding, understanding what their real estate needs are, connecting them with folks that I know have projects that are ongoing with open spaces or opportunities for them to come in. We're very quick in like the permitting process, public inspection process. So those aren't the sexy things that people usually want to talk about.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we can, flip our building and planning department flips permits really quick. Our fire inspector is very, what I'll say, business friendly and approachable, and works with businesses to make sure we get them in. We also help publicize a lot of these businesses. So we are a partner. You'll hear in a separate episode, about the Worthington Partnership and Experience Worthington. We collaborate on a lot of things to make sure that businesses are welcome and have opportunities to grow here. We've had some questions. A couple of the questions were about the balance between what we'll call, chain restaurants and locally owned restaurants. I think there is a perception, and I truly believe a piece of it is a perception, that we have more chains coming in and calling Worthington home in recent months and recent years than maybe in the past. But I jotted down a list of restaurants that have opened in the last year that are not.
Yeah.
And, Velka Grill, Chapala, Mexican Grill, Worthington Tavern, Kitty Cakes, Joya's Cafe, Suburban Kitchen, Aardvark Wines and Beer, and then the Whitney House, who is a staple in our downtown, is undertaking a significant reinvestment back into their space, and they're locally owned. Mm-hmm. We do have some new entities that are coming in that I'm also equally excited about, that are more chain or franchise owned, that are joining our Worthington Gateway site. That's DeBella Subs, Five Guys Burgers and Fries. There's a chicken and biscuit place that I think you'll really like.
Yeah.
So we do have a balance of users coming in. I will say that another thing to keep in mind for folks listening or watching is when a small business is making a decision, specifically a restaurant is making a decision to locate, they look at traffic patterns. They look at number of households that are within a proximity. And so when you do see some of these really cool, hip restaurants that I also want and will try my best to attract to Worthington, when they make a decision, they consider things like who's going to be walking by this space, how many cars are driving by this space, how many households are close and can walk to dinner at this space. And we aren't quite as dense as some of the communities that we compete with. And so we're not always at the top of the list. But we work hard to make sure that we're reaching out to those folks and that they consider Worthington.
Yeah. And I can only imagine, and I don't think this is something you can talk about, but being such a high trafficked area coming right off 270 along 23, just some of those costs too would make it a little bit difficult for local small businesses as well. That's
right. And we also have some actual programs in place that help support some of these small businesses. We saw during the pandemic that our businesses were struggling. we actually created a small business. It was called Reboot, but it was a program up to $5,000 per business to help businesses stay afloat. We did a We're Open marketing campaign where we put 100 flags, feather flags out, lining High Street and lining
Nina from the
Nina and I
partnership.
physically put these flags out. We funded and put out 100 flags that said we're open for business. And so it truly is a customized approach in Worthington. We need to continue to evolve as businesses do as well to support them. But we're working hard to make sure that we have cool, hip, fun places for families and visitors.
Well, and that's actually one, we had two questions around this kind of topic. So I'm glad you kind of ended with cool and hip. Are there any truth behind the rumors of entertainment use coming to Worthington or around the northern part of Worthington?
I thought we scratched this question from the, no, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, shoot.
So we have what you're referencing. So the city of Worthington has approved as part of the High North project. So High North is the redevelopment of the Worthington Mall. We have approved a entertainment use for that site. So it is slated to be a 2-story, 50,000 square foot entertainment use that I think the community would be pretty excited about.
Which falls in line with some of what we're going to hear on another episode when we have Matt McAllister on. So this is great to hear. Kind of leaving that Gateway project and looking more broad towards Wilson Bridge and High Street. One question that was submitted was around seeing a lot of for lease signs. Predominantly around those areas. Does that mean that all of these spaces are actually vacant? Like what does that mean, and where are we at in terms of vacancies?
Yep. So I love this question because I love the opportunity to answer this question. So I see a lot of commentary about, hey, we have for lease signs or commercial brokerage signs lining up and down High Street and Wilson Bridge. We have so much vacancy already. Why do we need more office? The fact is that a for lease sign does not equate to vacancy. The city of Worthington has about a 9% vacancy rate. So a single digit vacancy rate. The region is closer to 13 or 14%. So we are below what the regional average is. A for lease sign, a lot of the office product that we have in Worthington is multi-tenant. What I mean is it's not a single user that occupies the entirety of the building. A lot of our buildings have multiple tenants. And so the for lease sign, there's always some level of turnover. Leases don't always expire. Companies A through G, all of their leases don't expire at the exact same time. And so what happens is there is overlap. There are spaces in a multi-tenant building that constantly need filled at all times. And so the for lease sign provides the broker contact information to make sure that we are keeping that vacancy rate as low as possible.
Yeah. And kudos to you and to the city for keeping that, below the Central Ohio number of 13 or so percent. So kudos to you and those efforts. We're going to go back to kind of the rumor mill. We had a question regarding the Snow House Hotel project, as well as the Worthington Inn. Is there any kind of update or anything that you're able to share with all of us?
Yeah. So
or keep it between you and me.
I'll whisper it.
All right, perfect.
So lean in. When we received this question, I reached out to the developer because I wanted to hear, on the record what the update was, and the update from New England Development Company, the owner of the Worthington Inn, but also the group behind the potential Snow House Hotel, shared that they're excited to say that they're working with a restaurant operator on the Worthington Inn space. They're hoping to have something that they can share with the public in the next couple months, with hopes of filling the space by the end of 2023. So I'm really excited about that. That is
that quick.
That's what they shared. So fingers crossed that is the case. We all miss the inn being occupied and being part of the heart of downtown. With respect to the hotel, the response that I received was that for now it's kind of on pause. So the the interest rates that are increasing, as well as construction costs that are increasing.
Oh yeah.
The developers kind of put a pause on that, so they're optimistic that the hotel will still happen, but they're not doing a whole lot on it right now. It's kind of a wait and see with the general state of our economy as a country, as well as rising interest rates and construction costs.
Well, that's some exciting news for that part of historic Old Worthington. What could be?
That's one of our only vacancies in Old Worthington. So
wouldn't it?
I'm excited to get that filled.
Because just in the short time that I've been here in this role, I can think of 3 different restaurants that have filled some vacancies. So yeah, that would be the only space.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yep. Kind of getting out of the rumors. I'm not going to throw any more rumors at you. You also know what the questions are. So a few questions that we have, and something also that City Council, I believe, has come out and talked about, is housing and what the city intends to do to address housing in Worthington, whether that's affordable housing, workforce housing. What is going on currently on the city level regarding that topic?
Yeah, so a lot. The answer is a lot. And so housing continues to be, you'll hear you heard in a separate episode, we talk about Intel and the impact of Intel, not just from an economic development perspective, but it has ripples effect on housing. What I'll say is housing is diversity of housing product is critically important to Worthington's future. We don't know exactly what the answer is yet, and that's okay. We look at housing as a community, and I think it's important for people to realize and understand that housing is, we have a responsibility to address housing, but we are not alone. So the housing crisis in Central Ohio is a regional issue. We are a component part of that. Are we going to fix the housing crisis? No. Can we help? Yes. And I think that's the important thing for people to remember. When I think of housing and affordable housing and diverse housing options, I tend to bucket it into kind of 3 categories, ways that we can get at a solution. The first is zoning. When we look at zoning, we can talk about things that we currently allow or do not allow, and whether or not there should be tweaks there. That could be accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law suites. It could be duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, things that we may not be currently permitting under existing zoning, but do not take away from the character of the community.
Yeah.
Are there things that we can be doing there? Can we lean into that a little bit? And then some of our zoning categories. And I know this is a question that we have here in a minute, but are our existing zoning categories, where they need to be? How can those be tweaked to allow more density, or can we look at geographic areas of the community and take a look at our zoning and be more receptive to changes? The second category I'll look at is incentives. So anytime you throw money at something or have a subsidy of some sort, you can make that easier to do.
Yeah.
One of the really challenging things with affordable housing in Worthington is that Worthington's land prices are high. Mm-hmm. There's no way around it. Our land costs are high. And so for a developer to come in, be able to buy land, construct new with rising construction costs and interest rates, and then be able to make that an affordable product for a renter is difficult. So the way that you could potentially get around these things are you can subsidize. So the city could choose to subsidize the development just with grants or loans. You can look at tax abatements. So there are property tax abatements. Worthington does not currently allow residential property tax abatements, but that's something you can do. And what that does is it keeps your property tax costs down and makes a project feasible potentially. And then the other thing that City Council has been talking about and will continue to talk about, I think, is a affordable housing bond issue. And this is something that council has discussed at recent meetings. At the time of this time of this recording, they have not made a decision on that. Maybe that will have changed. But the idea is putting it to the voters. Mm-hmm. Is affordable housing important? And if so, how do we fund that? And are we willing to fund that as a community? Yeah. The last bucket I'll say is policy. So there are ways that you can get at the housing issue and the affordable housing shortage in this community by taking a look at existing policies. Pay to stay is a policy initiative by which you can essentially allow renters to stay in place, and if they pay up, they are not able to be evicted. So you can get at this with policy as well.
Well, you brought up, and I know we're coming up against time here. I have two questions that we have to ask. One that came in, and you touched briefly on it, zoning. Is there anything that the city's considering in terms of updating zoning, since it hasn't been updated since the 70s?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm going to tie this a little bit to the last question on housing as well. So we have taken looks at certain geographic areas, pockets within Worthington on updating zoning. Things that come to mind are East Wilson Bridge Road, spots on Huntley. And so we have taken a look at our zoning and updating our zoning. What I would say, in short, is in order to do a holistic upgrade to our zoning, we first need to kind of figure out where we're at and what we want. And what that requires is either an update to the comprehensive plan or a redo of the comprehensive plan. I moved on from this in the last question, but one of the other things that council is talking about that will feed into these zoning categories and housing is a housing study. Yeah. A housing study helps identify what our needs truly are, where we can move the needle, geographically move the needle. What would we allow? What are we comfortable with? And how much of an impact does that make? And so I think a housing study and a potential, update or redo of the comp plan, which are both things that council is currently discussing, are needed and are necessary first steps before you make large-scale changes to any zoning.
Certainly. We had a lot of great questions that were submitted, again, about three dozen questions that we tried to lump in. But like any great Q&A, we have to end with something that's kind of a fluff question. And this was a legitimate one. In our brainstorming sessions and recording of episodes, are we drinking beer or bourbon?
You want to answer this one?
I'll answer it because, as you know, I've had my own podcast, but never with video, and that's nerve-wracking. So I think we needed just a little bit, or I did, because I wasn't doing the Q&A today. Went with beer with Zaftig, actually, a brewery here in town, and
I think that's where the idea for the podcast was born too. At a picnic table at Zaftig.
The best ideas, I think, come when leaders get together and share ideas over a cold one. But thank you for answering all these questions. This is, I think, the epitome of why this partnership between the city and the chamber doing Amplify Worthington is so important. It's another platform to meet people where they're at, whether it's video or the audio, to get the answers to the questions they've been wondering about why decisions are made or future decisions are made for our community. So thank you for answering those.
No, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to future questions.
Yeah. And if you want to ask us some more questions, email us at AmplifyWorthington@gmail.com. We're going to try and do this every time we bulk record, which will be every couple of months. We want to answer your questions as best as we can and in a way that's kind of timely. Because we don't know when those episodes will air. So please, again, send those to AmplifyWorthington@gmail.com. Please help amplify our voice for this podcast by subscribing or leaving us a review. If you want to stay in the know of all things Worthington, follow the city across their social media platforms, predominantly Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and the same three social media platforms for the Worthington Area Chamber. Join David, myself, and Lee Brown the first Thursday of every month for our coffee and conversations that the chamber hosts in partnership with the city, where you can hear about everything related to economic development, projects going on here in the community. And most importantly, thank you for the time of listening to this podcast. And together, let's amplify Worthington.
Slant Media. Think big.